Good morning, Christian Takushi. Welcome to Lifestyle 74 Radio. How are you today?
Very good. Thank you for having me, Ron.
Thank you. Christian, you are a macroeconomist, and with your business in life is to guide companies and people in their placement of their money and so on, just to help give a broader view of what goes on in the world. I thought we'd talk this morning a little bit about Europe and where it's heading. You have some unique views on that, which are proving to be absolutely spot on. Tell me about it.
You mean on Europe or in general?
But that's up to you. I'm listening.
Oh, well, well, there's so much going on, Ron. Yeah, actually, this evening we're having a online seminar on the future of Europe. But what has been keeping me very busy in the last couple of days has been the inflation situation because a lot of people, housewives, consumers, are having to pay more for food, for gas, electricity, for many things. So inflation is becoming a real issue and a real problem for many people at the moment around the world, but also in Europe. That is a big issue, and so there are question marks about what's going on.
Well, yesterday there were big marches in France. The labor unions were on the streets by the tens of thousands, asking for more wages and trying to not just get caught up with the inflation, but to try to get ahead a little bit. We've got this 12% increase in energy, both electricity and natural gas, staring us in the face. And it's a serious situation, and I suspect this is just the beginning. Uh,
This is just the beginning, Ron. This is just the beginning. Actually, prices on the this is the you're talking about the consumer, what the consumer sees, but in fact, prices in Europe for gas have already doubled over the last 1 year,
wow.
and this has not hit the consumer yet, and the prices are still rising. For many years, one reason why people are writing to me or calling me is because for many years, for the last 7 years, we have here been warning a lot about the coming energy crisis and security crisis in Europe. That the EU is making terrible, really terrible mistakes in the area of energy and security. People may say, well, that's not so much. Well, not just that, also the supply chain. And I've been saying that there's going to be big problem with the supply chain. It's going to collapse. We're going to have big shortages of energy and big issues with our security. Now, people say it's not too much, and I say, well, it's security and energy. They go into everywhere. If you have a problem in those two areas, it affects everything. And we're beginning just, I think, to see the beginning of this unraveling.
Post COVID, and I think we can call it post COVID. It's been pretty well over for several months, but a lot of the factories are, while they begin to tool up again, they're having trouble getting parts out of China and so on. It just seems
Mm,
like there's just a supply chain problem worldwide.
this is part of the truth, only part of the truth. That is part of the truth. In a way, well, governments have no other choice but to tell people that, well, first of all, they're telling people, don't worry, we got this. This inflation that you're going to see is just very temporary. Don't worry, we got this. And the other thing they're telling people is, don't worry, we've got to figure out. We're transitioning to green energy. It's if there is higher prices, don't worry, it's the wind. The climate is they're blaming the climate, the wind, because it's not enough wind, and they're also blaming the British and the Russians because they're doing maintenance. They're also blaming the Russians for not rushing to deliver more gas. It's a blame game, but in fact, what you are seeing is the result of 10 years of zero interest rates, 10 years of underinvestment. Zero interest rates coupled with money printing create a speculative economy. Companies no longer have an incentive to invest in maintenance, in renewal of the plants, production capacities. They go out and speculate in the stock market, buying back their shares, buying up their competitors. That's how profits have been made the last 11 years. So companies have been just, running the business without investing very much. And at the first major disruption, you see the results. As soon as the capacity utilization has to go down and then up again, everything breaks up. And they don't have the capacity, they don't even have the labor to fix this. When they say the parts cannot be delivered, it's not totally true. Yes, the supply chain has been disrupted, but they're blaming it all on that. The fact is, the companies, the moment they start to run up again at 70%, 75 production capacity, everything starts to break down because they haven't been able to do, or not being able, they didn't want to do maintenance for many years. They have not been renewing the plants. Even the oil fields, the gas fields are old. Even the Russians didn't get money to renew their plants. Nobody wanted to lend. And you know what? No, not even banks wanted to lend to gas fields and oil pipes. Why? Because it's old economy and they didn't want to be shamed.
Mhm.
So I think interesting. I think we're coming to see that things are converging. Things are coming together. And I don't mean to alarm people, but I think people need to wake up in Europe.
Well, this northern gas pipeline out of Russia is it's finished, and yet I noticed that Germany's not rushing to open the spigot and let it flow. What's going on there?
Well, it is technically finished, but it has not passed all the supervision and control. And I think that's necessary. That's
Hmm.
not something that we can skip. There could be terrible accidents in the future. So I think that's something we have to understand.
Okay. Hmm.
But even if that's something that we can skip, it's not going to change the big picture. Even if the Russians start delivering tomorrow, we have an energy crisis in Europe. Our governments wanted to shift to green energies way too soon, way too fast. They switched off everything else.
Mm.
And I've
Nuclear,
been
for
warning
example.
about this. I've been warning about this.
Hmm.
This was, I mean, this is a policy made disaster. And I wish that our bureaucrats and leaders would acknowledge that, but they won't. They won't. There is also another element, Ron. The ECB, the European governments, they need inflation. So actually, in a way, all this is coming in handy for them, quite convenient for governments, because what the governments need the most at the moment is, but they don't need money because they're printing money. It's terrible, but they're doing that. What they need most is inflation. Our governments in the West are bankrupt, and the only way they can keep up life with a huge debt burden is by maximizing inflation and keeping interest rates at zero. That way, they can reduce the real burden of their debt, but punishing or confiscating their consumers and their citizens. This is why they can't say that. They have to say, we're fighting inflation, and don't worry, the inflation blip you're going to see is temporary. The truth is, they're very happy that the energy prices are shooting up. Because if energy shoots up, everything else gets more expensive. Not everything else, but many other things will become more expensive. Inflation will be much higher than the official numbers. This is for sure. It's already the case in Europe and the United States. Inflation is running in de facto at much higher rates than what the government is telling us. And the government cannot tell us the full truth because they need high inflation. That high inflation, with coupled with very low interest rates at zero, is helping the government survive with this huge pile of debt. So that is the reality. That's the truth.
So
But the
they can
governments
pay the
can tell
debt
us.
with inflated money.
Yes, absolutely.
Uh-huh.
Of course, it's a kind of confiscation or it's a massive tax increase on citizens, especially the middle
Yeah.
class. The poor don't pay taxes. It's the middle class that pay the taxes.
Yes.
And the rich, the rich, they find always ways not to pay taxes, as we saw in the recent Pandora papers. That is the middle class. We are seeing is actually the governments in Europe creating or welcoming inflation. They would not tell us, they can't tell us that, and keeping interest rates at zero. That way, they can survive with a huge government debt, but they're confiscating the middle class or increasing taxes on the middle class. This is a real tax on the middle class. This increase in prices, but it's of course affecting finally also the poor people that are on the verge of poverty in Europe are going to really shift into poverty this winter.
Hmm. And what about housing? Is that how does that fit in with the zero interest rate? People have been buying up housing right and left.
Yes, Governments in the West, industrialized nations, the so-called educated and civilized industrialized nations, have been doing something very, very extreme and reckless in the last 20 years, especially the last 12 years. They've been printing money and putting interest rates at zero. What is that? Basically, they've been creating money out of thin air and incentivizing people to buy stocks, buy real estate, and buy bonds with no money, just borrowing money at basically zero interest rates. So governments have been forcing or incentivizing people to buy bonds, stocks, and real estate in the industrialized nations, and that's very, very bad. So the governments have created an artificial bubble, a monster, a huge, huge bubble. Basically, our real most of our real estate in Europe, of our stock markets, is in a bubble created and supported by the government. They have inflated the real estate market and the stock market, and they are afraid you know, of deflating it because of the potential results of it.
So when interest rates do begin to go up, then people's mortgages are going to get so high they can't afford to keep up, and they'll have to default. Is that what's going to happen?
An ephemeric statement, because governments in the West, we don't have free markets. I mean, this is really a moment of truth for people. I hope they listen. There are no free markets, free financial markets in Europe or the United States. In the year 2009, our government seized financial markets and they fixed the interest rates. The interest rates are fixed by the government. It's all rigged and fixed. If governments would let markets dictate or determine interest rates as they used to be, interest rates in Europe for 10-year government bonds would be at least 7% because we are so indebted and even printing money. Probably 10% is closer to the truth. Instead, they are at 0%, 0.5%. So actually, yes, people say when interest rates go up, it's actually sounds almost like a joke, because everybody should know that interest rates are not really free, determined by markets. Interest rates are dictated every morning by the ECB.
Mm-hmm.
So the ECB controls supply and demand for bonds. They basically single-handedly determine how the yield curve, how interest rates should look during the day for the rest of the week. It's like the central planned economy of the Soviet Union during the Cold War. That's what we have actually in financial markets in the West and in the Western industrialized nations for the last 11 years. And I think it's time for the truth to be said.
Christian Takushi, you're having a webinar this evening at 6 o'clock local time. Can people tune in and watch that if they'd like to know more about this?
It might be a bit difficult because it's a limited number of participants to allow for flow, but they can write to me if someone is really interested to attend. People can write to me. They can write to info@geopoliticalresearch.com.
info@geopoliticalresearch.com.
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. Christian Takushi, it's always fascinating to hear you, and thank you for sharing your viewpoints, which are invariably ahead of the curve. Thank you for sharing with us this morning here on Lifestyle Radio.
Thank you.
God bless. Good day to you.
God bless you too.
Lifestyle 74 News. It's 8 o'clock Central Time. Over to Dublin.